We use the RepTrak model, which is saying that reputation at its core is an emotional bond. 3 areas that drive this emotional bond: how we're doing economically, environment, and effective government. Most people think that reputation management is really about moving perceptions out there from bad to good. That's actually a very dangerous path to take if you're not at the same time making sure that the reality is in sync with this. The thing that interests us is the difference between internal and external perceptions. So on the one end, the Russians and the Chinese, who have a much higher opinion of themselves than the G8 countries, while in South Africa we're at the extreme other end, where we have a much lower perception of South Africa than countries from the outside. We had a very high opinion about ourselves after the World Cup, and then there was a time when people started to get very cynical, particularly about government. Where we're doing well is that people think around the world that this is a beautiful country. And I suppose the good thing about this is something that the country is blessed with. It's not something that you can easily destroy. Relatively weak is with ethics and transparency, a safe environment. With a safe environment, brands and innovation technology is at the end.
The self-image of a lot of South Africans within the country is not good. Any country needs major brands, because that'll create jobs and money and self-confidence.
How do we create a new narrative that is really, rather than just propaganda or running down the country, one that is diverse and that really helps us to move forward?
And I think Ubuntu as a concept is also a huge South African brand.
So I'm not sure if you're not equating cynicism to government and patriotism, how people feel about being South African. I think there are 2 different things. Those who are in control of the business, they realize that attacking the country and doing that, actually, it has created a perception, and this perception is translating into rating. So the rating agencies are working on our doors every day, and that is changing because it's starting to hit into their pockets, their access to capital and so on, it gets affected. You realize with respect to labor-related issues, we're doing very bad in terms of productivity and so on.
If the Zimbabwean guys were to boycott the retailers in downtown Joburg, they will close. If I was working for SAA, I would encourage them to forget London and instead focus on Luanda, Lagos, and things like that.
South Africa ranked poorly in ethics and transparency. And from someone who's in government, would you say that has anything to do with our leaders lacking accountability?
I could safely argue that the fact that you can take the president of a country to a court of law says a lot about the strength of the judiciary, but your democracy as a country.
The other presidents stepped down before they're dragged to court.
There's not an international conference where South Africa is not playing an important role, whether it's climate change, whether it's disarmament. We are a key player.
I've seen the behavioral changes that happens when people have a realization and an understanding, because they start to feel that you're thinking with them and stop thinking for them.
What public diplomacy is doing for national diplomacy, and how we can create more campaigns to present South Africa as positively here at home, such so that young South Africans, older South Africans view themselves as global contributors or even national actors.
We are the criminals of the world. We are the number 1 rapists of the world. We are the most corrupt of the world. Given our background, we easily forget that we are resilient people. You see the lady sitting in a corner making a fire to prepare amakwini at 3 a.m. And what I always tell my team is, you are the job creator. Because when this company do good, you move up You create a space for, we can take somebody else in.
Have we taught each other about what is Bread South Africa and the effect of the negative self-inflicted wounds that we cause in this country? When are we going to take advantage of social media and technology to spread the good news, to bring South Africans to stand together, so that even when number one flops, we stand still?
How do you address the dilemma of South Africa looking like a very attractive country, particularly to the rest of African nations and people? I'm talking about the xenophobic attacks. I'm talking about the immigration laws that were instituted recently.
This country, unfortunately, it's built on the blood and sweat of fellow Africans, not from this country.
That's right.
If you remember the song by Hugh Masekela, Istimela, which is a train that was ferrying people from around the sub-Saharan Africa, bringing them here to come and work in the mines during the Industrial Revolution in this country. And unfortunately, most of those people are unable to enjoy the benefit of what we are enjoying today. If you look at the level of literacy within our workforce, it's so low. The level of literacy in Zimbabwe is so high. A lot of Zimbabweans who are in the financial institution, they work in this country. That's why at one stage, Uncle Bob said, if I were to withdraw them, your economy will collapse. Development of knowledge, it has no borders. As long as we're thinking within our boundaries, we're limiting ourselves in terms of our own development, the scope to develop our economy, develop ourselves as a country. Ethnic conflict are conflict fought over the past in the future. Now, we can't fight our past over our future. You need to define your future. And I think that to me, if we're not careful, we're going to generate even as a country, because the ethnic identity is something that we need to deal with. Ideally, we should be spending at least 1.5 of our GDP in R&D, because that's where you're going to come up with new innovative ways. Disruptive technologies are emerging. And if you're not playing in that space in terms of dedicating resources, it's a challenge. And the challenge, of course, here is you need to invest in the future. R&D is an investment in the future. We can't benefit our generation, but the generations to come will benefit in research that would have begun now.
How do we improve the reputation, practically speaking, from the ground up, if not from the top down?
When people talk about entrepreneurs, they seem to think always of young people. Doesn't matter what stage in life you are, you have opportunities. We all need to work together. And in any country, to me, that is government and the public sector with business. A country such as South Africa, which has had a difficult past, has now got a fantastic future in front of us.
It is important to prioritize South Africa. This country is crying out for its confidence to be boosted. You can beat yourself up to a point of being numb. And once you are numb, you don't have any feeling, so you can't move. We are the African continent's last hope, because if you look at the history of post-colonial Africa, you had problems and, challenges that have not yet been addressed fully. And people saying, well, us with the benefit of hindsight, we should be able to do better. We need to integrate, fully into the African continent, which is something that hasn't happened in the first 20 years. You make the elite uncomfortable in South Africa, you move the needle. And then immediately once everybody's interests were being threatened, we all get together, people got together and said, hey, let's deal with this problem. But we have to light the fires under the feet of the elite to say, let's address the issue of inequality. Because I think at the core of South Africa's problem is that issue.
I envy and admire the patriotism of Americans. Doesn't matter what happens, their loyalty to the flag, you can't question it. It doesn't matter which party eventually wins and who's occupying the White House, loyalty to the flag comes first. And I think if we reach that state as a country where each and every South African sees themselves as an ambassador of the country, wherever they go, I think half of our problems will be dealt with. In whatever space you're occupying, If you're a student, if you are a young and upcoming entrepreneur, if you're a teacher, whatever space you occupy, play your part in growing the nation brand of this country. The foreign policy of this country is the foreign policy of Ubuntu. It's grounded in Ubuntu. I am because you are. What is good for South Africa has to be good for the neighborhood of SADC, for the continent, for any other country. Because South Africa cannot be an island of peace and stability and prosperity surrounded by a sea of instability and underdevelopment. The voice of South Africa is sought on any major global issue. We are still the only African country in the G20. We're in BRICS. And in those meetings, we don't just speak for South Africa alone. As I'm saying, if you find yourself as the only African country surrounded by all these countries, you then have to speak for the region. So our success has to be Africa's success.